Don't worry about it.
Okay. Councillor Daniel Newman.
Your Worship, the Section 105 of the Land Transport Management Act requires a regional authority to establish a regional transport committee. In the case of Auckland, that is the governing body of Auckland Transport, or a joint regional transport committee that includes Auckland Transport as a member. So I'm new to this governing body, and what I would like to understand is how do the committee structures and the proposal whereby we're not part of the board allow us to fulfil the requirement to have the regional transport committee.
Yep, that's a technical question. Can I ask Rose to...
The Regional Land Transport Committee for Auckland is the governing body of Auckland Transport.
The board? Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Unlike anywhere else in New Zealand.
Correct.
Yeah, that again is set in legislation.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Councillor Cooper.
Oh, sorry. Oh, sorry. It's in another attachment. Just technical here.
Yep.
My question is, I just want an explanation on. Oh, you've changed it now. Was my about transparency. In the process that we've used, it's been confidential because these are natural persons and their identities are kept confidential to protect them in this process. So when you say transparent, does that mean everybody knows who's applying? That's what I want to understand when you say transparent,
no.
Because I think we throw around transparent like some magic buzzword, but we've got to protect natural persons. It's just like a job description, a job application. So what's the...
The process is transparent. The names of the individuals shouldn't be. That would be unfair, and we would do this in the same... That would remain confidential as it is for any consideration of any appointment.
Thank you. I just wanted that to be very clear because
it's
it could be
good
misinterpreted by the public.
Can I say the Privacy Act applies to this process, so that provides the natural protection for all applicants in this process.
Okay. Thank you. And last, Councillor Quacks.
Yeah, thank you, Mr Mayor. I note that the state in recommendation D that there are currently 3 vacancies. Based on that, you've already come to the conclusion that the ideal number of board members is 8, even though the legislation is quite clear that we can have as few as 6.
Yep.
So what makes you believe that 8 is the optimum number?
I think there's an arbitrary aspect to whether it's 6, 7, 8 or more, but the legislation set those figures out. We have always had 8 on the board, and my understanding from talking to the chair of the board is that there are a range of skills, given the importance of the decisions that are being made, that would benefit from filling all of those positions rather than leaving some of them vacant. But there's nothing magic about it, Councillor. You could probably get away with 6 if you had the 6 ideal people. With 8, you've got a range of skills that might better suit the board to carry out its functions, and its functions in the coming 18 months will be very important. Okay, I think having reached the end of questions, I've moved the motion. It's been seconded by Councillor Fletcher.
So can I ask something, Mr Chairman? With G, I don't want to vote for. I don't agree with G. Can that be separate? But I'm happy to vote for the other.
I can put them separately if you wish.
If you just want, yeah.
Although.
Or I could just note that I don't agree with G.
Or you could note that if you
fine.
prefer. Yeah. Okay, I'll open it up for debate. This is almost the last item on the agenda, and councillors will be wanting to get on to other functions. So I have Councillor Watson first of all.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and thank you for the opportunity to provide feedback here, and I certainly appreciate the efforts you're going to try and make the CCOs more accountable, in particular Auckland Transport, because you're absolutely right. There is an expectation that was very clear in the election that the public think that councillors in particular lack influence, lack power, lack the ability to hold these organisations to account. So certainly anything that can be done to strengthen that is much welcome. You've had feedback from councillors with respect of this particular decision. I certainly wasn't one of the people that gave that feedback. I didn't even think to bring it up. I just assumed that it would be continuing as normal, but clearly some people have expressed a contrary view, and without knowing what they said, I suspect that in some instances anyway, it's based around the notion of remuneration, that there is iniquity there, and there may well be, but I think to bring that into it is actually confusing two completely separate issues. So I'm going to leave that aside. I believe it is something that would have to be addressed, but I don't think it's pertinent to what's before us here today. When I read through the agenda item, which is a good one and contains a range of views, I certainly looked at what our AT reps, our councillor reps on the board said, because it's a bit like us with council in my view. They're there day in, day out, or meeting in, meeting out. If anyone's going to have a sense of how the AT board rolls, I would suggest that was Councillors Lee and Councillors Fletcher. So I took particular interest to read what they said, and I meshed that in with my own experience with the AT board, because I have been to present to them before myself, and I certainly agree with the notion that the independent directors certainly seem reluctant to engage with the public or even councillors. So you go along there and you present, and no one ever actually asks a question. There's kind of like a stony silence, a very strange stony silence. You come up with what you think is quite a compelling argument, and no one gives you the courtesy of a question, and that happened to submitter after submitter. So that struck me as unusual. And what also struck me as unusual is the difference between the independent directors and our councillor directors, because I think they're quite, although they're all serving as directors, they're quite distinct roles. The independent people, and I looked at their pedigrees from the biographies in the AT annual report, and they're certainly impressive enough. But what they didn't have, and what I suggest our two councillor representatives had a kind of corporate knowledge and a link with transport in Auckland that went back many decades in some instances. And I felt that is something that councillors can bring, and in particular the two councillors we had. So I'm going to stop speaking generically, because I know that a number of councillors would be totally inappropriate, and I'll include myself in amongst that. I don't have the background or the knowledge, I know that. I think we've been incredibly fortunate of the two people that we did have, and both as a former Mayor of Auckland City and as a Chair of the Auckland Regional Council. And I think most people, that if they were reasonably objective about that, they'd have to agree with that. And that was certainly borne out to us as councillors. I can remember Councillor Lee coming and bringing a huge amount of intellectual rigour to the comparison between the performance of the Auckland Rail network and the commuter network in Wellington. Now that simply would not have happened, and did not happen with any independent directors. So I think, far from putting all directors on the equal foot, I think the bar for the council directors is actually higher, and in the last two terms, I wasn't here the first term, we had that degree of expertise, and we were very fortunate to have that. And that's not to say that can't be taken up by other individuals in here who I think are similarly, that's 1 minute, isn't it, to go, similarly endowed with that ability. So I see, for instance, or note the exceptional circumstances, particularly skill that would be hard to replace. I would suggest in Councillors Fletcher and Lee, they fit that exceptional circumstances. In conclusion then, I would just like to make a plea, Mr Mayor, and I absolutely respect the position you've been put in, and the different views that you've got to weigh up, that there be some consideration given to how that expertise that we were fortunate to have, that do constitute for me exceptional circumstances, could be retained, even while some other councillors who might be interested could be brought on or could be brought up to speed to fulfil that role. But I guess I would just finish by concluding that the skill and the requirements of the councillor directors I look upon as being distinct from the other directors and be far more valuable ones to the people of Auckland, that we're looking to bring that degree of accountability that's driving your item here today.
Thank you very much, Councillor Watson. Can I invite Councillor Cooper to
Thank you.
speak?
I'm going to bring a contrary view, Mr Mayor. I agree with what you're doing. I think that you're carrying out the resolution that was put forward by the previous, one of the committees of council to have a look at this. You're a new mayor, you're going to bring your own way of doing things and views. There's a few things I want to look at. I think, one, being a councillor director, which you're not really a councillor director, you're a director appointed by council, but brings inherent conflicts. Cannot get away from that. And just noting Councillor Watson saying that when you go to the the AT board and you met with Stony Silence, well, just remember, those people are not politicians. They don't play to the gallery and they don't need to. And that's the difference between all of us and people on the CCO. You're not going to get the same kind of response because it's not televised. They're not needing to get voted by anybody. So of course you're going to have a kind of a bit more normal company response. And that doesn't mean that people don't care, because I'd have to say that over the last 6 years, the amount of projects that have been completed by AT are phenomenal. We've spent a phenomenal amount of money on a huge number of projects. For me, some of what you have said, Mr Mayor, that I sort of take issue or question is that you said in your speech there from the chair that, which is kind of contradictory to this item G, is that you said that you thought that the piece of legislation, LAGACA, that allowed for appointments, if the council wanted to do it, was just a bit of window dressing, really, was sort of a bit of a token, a show as an accountability tool, but then now you're saying that councillors can apply, so I'm just a little bit confused about that. Because when you look at all the CCOs, the ones we've had the biggest issues with is AT, but that's the only one with councillor appointments on it. So, you know, maybe there's a correlation, I don't know. So for me, I don't think there's any benefit there, because when you talked about doing reports, well, inherently, as a director, they are not councillors when they sit there, they are directors, and they have a duty of care to that board, and they cannot make reports to us. They just can't do that legally. So that's where the public's perception that you get democracy, you know, at that table is not actually true. It's not possible. So it's a bit of a sham, it's a bit of a trick to the public that they're there to be able to report back. Because we know we've had things like light rail, the first thing we find out about it is when we get the RTLP. You know, we didn't get told about that, and quite rightly, they shouldn't have, because they're not supposed to. So when people are looking for somebody to be there to report back to council, it doesn't happen, you can't do it. So that's not one of the mechanisms you can use. But I fully support using other mechanisms that we haven't used, or being more stringent. That's good, we need to do that. But I don't think having councillors there helps. And the very fact that councillors are saying, oh, can we have special conditions for us, means they will not be on a level playing field. So you can't do that either, and I hope that if this gets through, that is not softened. So for me, you know, and also we've had opportunities to put retiring councillors on CCOs and we haven't done it. So why would you put a current person on there? It doesn't make sense. It doesn't give full the opportunity to get as many very experienced people around the table. And we still have that democratic ability to vote things down when it comes to LTP. That's where we make the final decision. So for me, I can't support, I'm happy to have 3 more directors, but I can't support having councillors, and that has nothing to do, Nothing personal about the previous, though it is tempting, Councillor Lee. It's not at all, because they've finished their terms, they've served us well, but now we're going to try something different because the last 6 years hasn't worked for us. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Cooper. Councillor Casey.
You weren't here the last 6 years.
Mr Mayor, just keep me on track if I wander a wee bit, because I haven't got a speech prepared and I feel a bit strongly about this. The first thing is, this is a political debate, first and foremost, about whether we should have councillors on the Board of Auckland Transport, and I think that's just been articulated by Councillor Cooper, which is the other side of the argument that I have, which is we do need councillors on the Board of Auckland Transport. And what's been missing so far is anything to do with the public. The public perception of councillors on the Board of Auckland Transport is to keep the bastards honest. That's the job these two have been doing in the public mind. And I think we need, this is a mayor who said we need to increase accountability and transparency. That's what these guys have been doing for this council and for the public of Auckland for the last 6 years. That's what they've been doing. And it's been a tough job. And to be honest, I don't think they have been treated well. And you've said today, oh, the 2-year term was up and that was it. But that's not what I'm hearing from them. That's not their understanding of what happened when they had to close up their computers and leave the board meeting. So there's obviously crossed wires somewhere, and I never got that perception either. I never heard that. I never saw that in an email that, you know, Councillor Casey, Councillor Fletcher and Councillor Lee's terms up and I'm going to be asking them to leave. The kinder thing would have been to have left them there until we had had this political discussion. And the first political discussion is whether we should have council representation on the board. Now, to conflate councillor positions